Welcome to Lost Among the Stars, Season 1, Episode 5. Written by Brian M. Brumbaugh. Read by Gwyneth Paltrow. The Fishing Mission. The screech hit first. Ayla jolted upright in her bunk, heart thudding. It took her only a second to relax, blinking against the soft blue cabin lights. A familiar flurry of feathers and talons streaked across the floor near her bed, Peck, in full morning form. The bird was a burst of gold, green, and copper blue, darting in tight circles and chirping sharply like she was announcing something important. "Oomph. Good morning to you, too," Ayla mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Bob's voice chimed gently through the cabin. "Rise and shine, Captain Janeway. Ambient temperature is 18.7 degrees Celsius. Internal systems are nominal. Peck has been active for precisely 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Peck flapped dramatically onto the nearby crate and gave a proud screech, as if on cue. "Shall I open the ramp door?" Bob asked. Ayla yawned and stretched. "Yes, please." A hiss of hydraulics filled the shuttle as the ramp door lowered. Cool morning air swept in, carrying with it the scent of dew-covered grass and distant flowers. Without hesitation, Peck leapt from the crate and sprinted outside, tail feathers bouncing. Bob waited a moment. "Recommend you begin morning prep. We have a busy day ahead." Ayla groaned but got moving. She cleaned up with a swipe of a warm cloth, changed into her fresh uniform, and munched through her morning ration, a compressed bar that somehow managed to taste like cinnamon toast and rubber. "Today's priority is food assessment," Bob said, his voice now sharper, more professional. "Our ration reserves have dropped to 13 days. Continued reduction without replenishment will initiate emergency protocol." Ayla stopped mid-chew, grimacing. Yeah, I know, no pressure." A hollow display flickered to life above the table, displaying a lineup of alien vegetables with their classified Earth analogs. Vivid renderings floated in the air. "Current viable flora," Bob began, "include spiral-rooted tubers, closest match, carrots. Ring-bulb plants, analog, onions. Bloodleaf roots, similar to beets. Spongy nodule tubers, consistent with potatoes. And stalk-vine shoots, comparable to celery. All are digestible with minimal prep." "That's great," Ayla said, perking up. "Carrot beet stew, anyone?" Bob ignored the sarcasm. "However, these options alone are nutritionally incomplete. Protein is required to balance your diet." Ayla's smile faded. "Scans have identified several viable sources," Bob continued, images rotating above the table. "Aquatic fauna, 2 species of fish. Terrestrial fauna, small rabbit-like mammals, arboreal rodents, and an antlered quadruped resembling a deer. Processing required. Final analysis mandatory post-capture." Ayla wrinkled her nose. "I'm not sure I'm ready to roast tree rats." She may select the protein source to pursue. "Today's mission should prioritize acquisition." A pause. Ayla stood up and planted her hands on her hips. Let's try fish." "I like fish. Fishing sounds nicer." Bob responded immediately. "Excellent." Displaying net and pole schematics now. The projection shifted to a blueprint-like interface, showing 2 designs, one for a woven net fashioned from flexible vine-like fibers, and another for a pole rig using her spare carbon rod, braided thread, and a small hook fashioned from her multi-tool. "You'll need to gather the appropriate materials. I will guide construction. Water analysis suggests the northern stream holds the highest probability for fish encounters," Bob said. Ayla nodded, the tiniest grin forming as she studied the plans. "Fishing it is, then." Outside, the golden grasses whispered in the wind, and somewhere just beyond the field of view, a blur of feathers darted between the blades, watching, waiting. She glanced at the open door. Hope Peck's not hungry for sushi. Lines and loops. The morning air was crisp and fragrant as Ayla knelt in the grass just outside the cat's ramp. The metal hull behind her still held the warmth of the shuttle's systems. But out here, she felt the full touch of the alien breeze brushing through the tall grass and across her face. Peck, true to form, was not making this easy. The bird zipped by for the fourth time, flapping a few inches off the ground before thumping into a nearby patch of grass, chirping as if announcing some grand accomplishment. Ayla didn't even look up. "Bob," she muttered, her voice half-focused. "What are the odds she'll get bored and let me finish?" "Low," Bob replied. Peck has shown a high activity index during early daylight hours. Statistically, this behavior will persist for another 47 minutes. Great. Ayla tugged on another length of creeper vine, its pale green skin still slick with morning dew. She looped it around her arm to dry and sighed at the messy, knotted mass in her lap. Her first attempt at weaving a fishing net had gone poorly. The squares were uneven, some stretched nearly into circles, others too tight to let anything through. One whole side sagged under its own weight. It looked more like a broken hammock than a tool for catching food. Peck trotted over, tilted her head, and pecked the drooping corner. "Don't judge me," Ayla said, glaring. "Won't you try making a net out of alien spaghetti?" The bird answered with a proud trill and began dragging a loose vine away with her beak. "Peck!" Ayla scrambled forward, reaching for the strand. "That's not a toy!" She yanked it free and sat back with a huff, pulling her tangled mess into her lap again. Nearby, Peck puffed up and gave a low warble of protest before darting off to chase a fluttering insect that gleamed like colored glass in the sun. "Recommend simplifying the pattern," Bob said calmly. "Try a diamond weave, 4-knot anchor per intersection. Discard the flawed sections." Yeah, Ayla murmured, already slicing through the worst part with her multi-tool. "Simpler. I get it." She took a deep breath and started fresh. This time, she laid the vines flat across 2 scavenged branches anchored between 2 small rocks. Working more slowly, she began weaving one strand over and under, tying knots at each junction just like Bob showed on the schematic. It still wasn't pretty, but it was starting to work. Halfway through the weave, she spotted Peck watching again, this time perched neatly on the ramp, head tilted, tail twitching with restrained energy. Ayla grinned. "See? Progress." Peck leapt down and strutted over, stepping delicately onto the net before Ayla could stop her. "No!" The weave pulled tight and the stones shifted. Several knots snapped. The net sagged again. Peck froze, blinked innocently, and let out a questioning chirp. Ayla stared at her. Peck blinked again. "I don't know whether to laugh or cry," Ayla said, setting the net aside with a sigh. "Your frustration is understandable," Bob said sympathetically. Perhaps a brief pause would reduce error rate, but Ayla wasn't done. She carefully removed the damaged knots, muttering as she worked, and tried again. This time, she doubled the vine at each tie point and reinforced the top with a crossbar made from a dry, curved branch she had found near the ridge 2 days earlier. Finally, it held its shape. Ayla held it up, stretching the sides. The net flexed but didn't sag. A pair of small stones tied to the bottom corners would help it sink. It was crude, but it was hers. "Tonette's done," she whispered. Peck let out a happy screech, flapping her wings as if applauding. "Now," Ayla said, turning to her second task, "and let's make the rod." She retrieved her salvaged carbon rod, once a backup antenna, and tied a length of tightly braided vine to the tip. For the hook, she selected a sliver of glossy bone she had sharpened with her multi-tool, then used a bit of fabric from her field pouch to secure it. The line was knotted, tested, and after a few test swings through the air, declared functional. Peck lunged to catch the line as it flicked past. "Not a toy, I swear to the stars, Peck." Bob's voice broke in. Construction of both net and pole complete. Material strength, acceptable. Success probability for catching fish. Ayla stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "That's good enough for me." Peck chirped excitedly, wings half spread. Let's go fishing," Ayla said. "The catch." "'T okay, Ayla," Bob's voice echoed through the shuttle's cabin. "Said I have 2 brief instructional guides on primitive fishing techniques." Displaying now, Ayla leaned forward on her elbows as 2 holographic windows opened in front of her. One showed a grizzled survivalist crouching beside a stream, weaving a net out of plant fibers. The other featured a more polished demonstration of a rod and line technique using local bugs for bait. The rod video drew her in. The demonstrator flicked the line with a practice snap, the bait landing on the surface of the water with barely a ripple. Pfft, Ayla muttered. Looks easy when he does IIT. You have an exceptional capacity for learning, Bob said. Although, you may find the fish less cooperative than the instructor. Ayla grinned and stood, slipping her utility vest on. She secured her scanner, comlink, and sidearm, then picked up the rod and neatly coiled net. Peck chirped near the door, feathers fluffed and tail twitching. Ready to go, Featherbutt? Ayla asked. Peck let out a triumphant screech and darted down the ramp. The walk to the stream was one of Ayla's favorite things. The alien landscape stretched around her, wild and bright under twin suns, one gold, one rose-colored, casting a dappled shimmer across the green-gold grasses. The soil, dark and rich, gave off a faint earthy sweetness. Tall reeds brushed her arms. Flashes of iridescent insects zipped through the air. Peck ran ahead, occasionally doubling back to check on her, her bright plumage flickering like fire through the brush. As they approached the stream, Ayla could hear it before she saw it, a rushing, tumbling roar instead of the usual gentle gurgle. The recent rains had transformed it. The stream was wide now, nearly 30 meters across. The water rushed high and fast, roiling with frothy whitecaps and silt. Ayla stood at the edge, squinting into the middle, trying to find the bottom. Bob, she said, stepping back. In a way, I'm waiting in there. Wise, Bob responded. So its current velocity is high. Depth at center estimated at over 2 meters. Seek a calmer area downstream. They followed the stream bank for nearly 20 minutes before finding what they needed, a gently curving bend with a broad eddy, the water swirling slowly around a bank of smooth stones. Perfect, Ayla whispered. She set her net down and began untangling it. It was her third iteration, and despite her earlier successes, it resisted her attempts to deploy it. Twice, the vine lines tangled. Once, the stones she'd tied to the bottom pulled the whole net sideways. Peck, ever helpful, stomped directly across the center mid-adjustment. Peck! The bird paused, blinking up at her innocently. Ayla sighed, then laughed. Oh, right. Just stay off the knots, okay? After 30 minutes, she finally secured the net across a narrow rock outcrop, anchoring both ends with heavy stones and letting the weighted middle dip into the slow current. With the net fishing passively, Ayla turned her attention to the rod. She knelt near the edge, overturned a few stones, and found a handful of wriggling, segmented bugs. They squirmed in her hand as she baited the line. Flick, splash. The first cast came up empty, so did the second, and the third. The bugs dangled uselessly, untouched. After almost an hour, her line still dry, Ayla sat back and groaned. Bob, remind me why people think this is fun? Many humans find the combination of patience and challenge therapeutic. Therapeutic is not how I'd describe bug guts on my fingers. Just then, she saw it, a flicker beneath the surface. Small fish darting upward, snapping at the tiny bugs that landed on the water. They're eating the flying ones, she said. She scanned the air and spotted one of the insects hovering nearby, a thin-bodied flyer with gossamer wings. She bolted after it, stick in hand. What followed was a chaotic 10 minutes of swatting, missing, chasing, tripping, and finally, miraculously, a solid thwack. The bug spiraled to the ground. Triumphant, she threaded it onto the hook and cast again. On her third cast with the flyer, she felt a tug. Her eyes lit up. Bob, fish on! She reeled it in slowly, heart pounding, but just as it neared the bank, the fish twisted and snapped free. New! Twice more, the same thing happened. She adjusted the hook angle, retied the knot, rebaited, and cast again. Finally, on the fourth catch, the fish held. Ayla dragged it ashore with a squeal. Yes, yes, I got you. She did a full-on happy dance, arms flailing, feet stomping, laughter ringing through the air. And then Peck darted in, snatched the fish, and sprinted off. "Peck, stop!" The bird paused, tail high, fish flopping from her beak. She turned to look at Ayla, feathers ruffled. Ayla stomped up, trying to remember not to yell. Peck watched her cautiously. Ayla took the fish back gently, meeting the creature's eye. Peck chirped softly, confused. After a beat, Ayla crouched and held the fish out. "You stopped when I asked." "That was good." "So here," she said, handing the fish back. Peck blinked once, then plopped down and tore into her prize. By the time the suns had passed overhead, Ayla had caught 5 more fish. 2 slipped away. 3 were kept. Peck got the other 2, happily crunching through bones and all. She checked the net once more. Empty. With her catch secured in a pouch lined with damp grass, Ayla began the walk back to the shuttle. Peck kept close, occasionally chirping as if offering commentary. "You were no help with the bugs," Ayla said. "But you're pretty good at guilt-tripping me into sharing lunch." Peck puffed proudly. Back at the shuttle, Ayla placed the fish into a sanitized tray. "Bob, how we looking?" Scanning now. Results, edible. Protein composition favorable. No toxins detected. Great. What now? A new video appeared on the wall, a gloved hand slicing through fish with terrifying efficiency. Ayla paled. "Do I have to?" And did say you liked fish." She sighed. "Fine, I'll be brave." The first attempt was messy, the second was worse. But by the third, she got the rhythm. Peck sat nearby, pecking at the scraps Ayla tossed her. Once done, Ayla sealed the cleaned fillets in the shuttle's refrigeration drawer and wiped sweat from her brow. Outside, she built a simple fire ring from river stones and stacked a small pile of firewood she'd gathered. From the emergency kit, she pulled the electronic fire starter, a spark, a flicker, then flames. She skewered one fish on a stick and held it over the fire, turning it slowly, checking the temperature with her scanner. 63 degrees Celsius. Here goes nothing. She bit in. Eyes widened. "Pup, it's amazing." "More likely your taste receptors are reacting to the novelty after extended ration use." "Shh," she said, taking another bite. She cooked the second fish, then the third. Peck watched the whole time, head cocked. Bellies full, Ayla leaned back with a sigh. The net was a total fail, though. "It will improve with time. Tools require practice." Bob paused. "Tomorrow we begin lessons in fire, starting without the aid of electronics. Your current ignition tool has limited battery life." Ayla nodded, then poured water onto the fire, watching the steam rise. "Come on, Peck," she called. "Bedtime." The little predator trotted inside behind her. Outside, the stars began to rise. Inside, Ayla climbed into her bunk, a full belly, tired arms, and a heart warm with quiet victory. Sparks and symbols. Peck shrieked from across the cabin, leaping onto Ayla's bed and flapping her wings wildly. Okay, Ayla groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. "I'm up." Peck squeaked again and nipped gently at her toes. Ayla threw the blanket off. "Da Bob, open the ramp door." "Opening," came the AI's calm reply. The hatch hissed, bathing the floor in golden light. Peck bolted outside like a shot, her vibrant feathers flickering in the morning sun like a living flame. "She never walks anywhere," Ayla muttered, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "We have a full itinerary today," Bob reminded. "Water collection, fire starting practice, checking the fish net, and a sector survey in grid 9-2. Please begin your morning preparations." I'm up. Ayla yawned and stretched before slipping into her form-fitting blue uniform. She checked each pocket on her utility vest with practiced efficiency. Communication link, sidearm, scanner, emergency beacon, hydration pack, first aid kit. She tapped each one in rhythm as she whispered, "Check, check, and check." Then she fastened 3 water cylinders to her back straps and clipped on her field journal, which now bore several pages of sketched flora, fauna, and scattered observations about Peck. She grabbed a ration bar from the storage bin and a hairbrush. multitasking like only she could, brushing with one hand and munching with the other. Sunlight spilled through the viewport, catching the etched letters on the console, DJT-1. She paused, frowning. "Hey, Bob," she said through a mouthful of food, "what would it take to get the name Cat on the outside of the shuttle? I mean, that's her real name." DJT-1 is boring. There was a beat. "Shuttle exterior modifications require maintenance drone activation," Bob said. "This would draw from auxiliary power reserves currently allocated for habitat regulation and system redundancy. It would use power that could be put to better use." Ayla's shoulders slumped. She walked over to the viewport and placed her hand against the glass. "And why name the shuttle after my mom, Bob? Catherine Janeway. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't for her." Bob was quiet for a moment, his voice softer when he replied, holding off on the request. Ayla blinked. "Really?" "And you are precocious, Ayla," Bob said. "Your emotional logic often overrides strategic calculations. However, morale optimization is a valid consideration. I will evaluate the power impact and allocate accordingly." Ayla smiled, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. "Thanks anyway, Bob. Even if it doesn't happen, just thinking about it helps." She zipped her boots, strapped on her gear, and gave one last glance at the worn DJT-1 label, whispering, "We'll get it right. Someday." Water collection came first. Ayla and Peck walked the now familiar trail side by side. The morning dew caught the light like crystal dust, and birds with translucent wings darted in the air above them. Ayla glanced down at Peck, who chirped and darted into the tall grass, only to pop out again like a feathered jack in the box. At the stream, the water still ran fast, but Ayla found a shallow bend where she could fill the canisters safely. As she knelt, Peck waded in up to her knees, splashing wildly before shaking off like a drenched dog. "Peck!" Ayla laughed. "You're worse than the kids in the dome fountain." Back at camp, Bob was ready for her fire starting lesson. "Today we begin primitive ignition methods. Based on your coordination and endurance, we will start with the bow drill." The first attempts were frustrating. The spindle slipped, the bowstring tangled. At one point, Peck ran off with a dry leaf bundle Ayla had carefully arranged. "Peck, no, that's my tinder," Peck responded with a sassy chirp and dropped it on her head. Finally, sweat dripping and arms aching, Ayla saw the first thread of smoke. She cupped the ember, blew gently, and watched as a tiny flame flared to life. "Hees!" she shouted, jumping up. Her signature happy dance followed, complete with claps and a spin. "Progress noted," Bob said. "Effort to success ratio consistent with early terrestrial experimentation." Translation, "I'm awesome," Ayla beamed. Later, the stream shimmered with midday light. Ayla checked her net and let out a whoop. "Pinine fish! Peck, you lucky charm!" Peck chirped in approval and caught one of the tossed fish midair. Crunching echoed through the reeds. Ayla gathered the remaining fish in her woven carrier. The hike back felt lighter than usual, her feet barely touching the ground. When she crested the last rise before camp, she stopped short. The shuttle's side now read in clean, bold lettering, "Cat." She gasped. "Bob, you said it would use too much power." Morale optimization was deemed a higher priority. "We will compensate for the power expenditure by rebalancing the auxiliary systems." Ayla dropped the fish carrier and ran her hand along the lettering. She would have loved this, thank you. Bob didn't respond right away. "And you continue to surprise me, Ayla Janeway." Cleaning the fish wasn't easier, but Ayla was more confident now. She worked in rhythm, gutting and trimming, tossing scraps to Peck, who waited with her usual impatient chirps. Once stored, Ayla prepped for the next leg of the day, mapping Sector 9-2. She and Peck crossed new terrain, marbled stone outcrops, vast fields of purple grass, and patches of dense underbrush that required crawling. Ayla sketched and scanned everything, updating the sector overlay on her tablet. In a sun-drenched glade, she found 2 berry bushes. "Bob, can you scan these?" Preliminary analysis suggests similarities to earth fruits, Fragaria, and vaccinium. Final tests pending. Peck sampled one, made a confused face, and promptly sneezed. "We'll wait on you to clear them," Ayla giggled. They climbed a narrow ridge and stumbled upon a cave entrance, massive and black, carved into the hillside like a yawning mouth. "I want to see inside," Ayla whispered. "One negative," Bob said firmly. "And to return and retrieve a reconnaissance probe for interior mapping." "You always ruin the mystery," she huffed. "I prioritize survival over drama." She rolled her eyes and marked the cave on her map. On the way back, she gathered more vegetables: orange root carrots, celery stalks, and the familiar onion bulbs she knew she could cook with. Dinner was a feast: fire-roasted fish with mixed greens and root veggies steamed in a folded thermal blanket near the coals. Peck hovered nearby, sneaking nibbles. Afterward, Ayla doused the fire with stream water, watching steam spiral into the star-streaked sky. She stepped inside and called softly, "Come on, Peck." The little bird followed, hopping past her into the warmth of the shuttle. Inside, Ayla stood before the new name on the cabin wall, Cat. She placed her palm against it and whispered, "Night, Mom." Bob dimmed the lights. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new dangers, new dreams. But tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be, a break in the pattern. The next morning came abruptly. Peck shrieked and flapped her wings in Ayla's face, hopping from the bunk rail to her chest in a flurry of feathers. Ayla groaned. "Bob, please open the ramp door." Opening," Bob replied. Peck shot out like a blur the moment the hatch hissed open, vanishing into the grasslands beyond. But Ayla didn't move. She rolled onto her side, buried her head into the blanket, and sighed. "Oh, Ayla," Bob prompted after a pause. "Morning checklist has not begun. Hydration, hygiene, and nutrition protocols are pending. Still no movement." "Ayla," Bob repeated, softer this time. "Is something wrong?" She peeked one eye out from the blanket. "I'm just tired of doing the same stuff every day. Water, fish, fire, maps, sleep. It's like school, but outside. Where's the fun? Where's the adventure?" Bob was quiet for several seconds, analyzing. "While maintaining a structured routine is critical for survival," he began, "and your current emotional tone suggests a need for balance. Recreation contributes to mental stability, especially in long-term isolation environments. I believe it is time we implement scheduled play." Ayla sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. "Play? Seriously?" "Yes. As you are fond of saying, we have a lifetime to get things done. Today's itinerary has been revised. Tasks include water collection, fish net checking, vegetable gathering, followed by 2 hours of Ayla time, then mapping of Sector 9-3. Ayla blinked, considering it. Then a smirk spread across her face. "New plan," she said, hopping to her feet. "When we do water collection, play with Peck, check the fish nets, play with Peck again. And then we go back to that cave in Sector 9-2. I'll collect veggies along the way." Bob hesitated. "Once your proposed schedule diverges significantly from the survival optimization model," Ayla raised an eyebrow. "But morale is a valid consideration," Bob finished. "Request approved. Implementing revised plan. Proceed with morning preparations, Captain Janeway." Grinning, Ayla zipped into her uniform and clipped her gear in place. Outside, Peck flitted through the grass like a golden comet, waiting. Adventure was calling. And today, it sounded like laughter. Spider silk and silver streams. The walk to the water was slow and quiet, the kind of silence filled with life. Ayla let her fingers brush the tops of the purple grass as she moved, the early morning suns casting gold and rose hues across the landscape. Halfway to the stream, she stopped. There in a tree, suspended between 2 gnarled branches, hung a spider web. It shimmered in the twin sunlight like strands of spun glass. Ayla crouched low and opened her sketch journal. Peck crept beside her, watching silently as Ayla's pencil danced across the page. The web's delicate arcs, the way the light refracted through its fibers. Ayla tried to capture it all. Then a small insect darted into the web and was instantly caught. Ayla paused, mesmerized. From the shadows, a spider emerged, green and black with translucent legs. With eerie grace, it encased the insect in a fine cocoon of silk. Peck tilted her head, mirroring Ayla's fascination. "Amazing," Ayla whispered. They resumed the walk. The stream had grown, now more of a river, over 30 meters wide and rushing fast with yesterday's rain. Ayla stood back as she filled her canisters at the shallows. Across the water, movement caught her eye. A deer-like creature, four-legged and tall, stood with its young tucked beneath. The baby nursed quietly. They didn't notice her. Or didn't care. Ayla barely breathed, not wanting to ruin the moment. Then Peck came barreling up the bank with a triumphant squawk.
The creatures fled. Peck,
Ayla called, half laughing. "Too scared them off, you silly featherball." She filled the last container and strapped it to her harness. Rather than heading straight back, she turned downstream. The walk to the net was quiet. Ayla began to really notice how beautiful her new home was. Strange, towering flowers bobbed in the breeze. Giant, soft-edged leaves stretched skyward from trees with bark like braided rope. The light through the mist painted everything in pastels. Peck stayed close, occasionally darting ahead, her bright colors flashing between the reeds. At the net, Ayla frowned. Only 5 fish. She hauled it in and quickly found the reason, a small tear at the corner seam. She sat down and tugged her repair kit from her belt, threading a reinforced filament through the torn edge with careful, practiced fingers. Peck hopped up beside her, pecking at the net. "Oh, you're not helping," Ayla smirked. "But you're cute, so I guess I'll allow it." Once fixed and redeployed, she wiped her brow. "Bob, net repaired and back in the water. Only 5 fish today. Might be the current or the tear. Just thought you should know." Acknowledged. Bob responded over comms. "Thank you for the update. Continue as planned." Ayla smiled and stood. On the way back, she stopped twice to sketch. A cluster of flowers that pulsed with soft light, and a strange insect with wing patterns like stained glass. Back at the shuttle, she loaded the water into the purifier tank and cleaned the fish in her usual spot, humming as she worked. Peck waited patiently. When Ayla tossed the scraps, she pounced on them with a flurry of feathers. "Dinner and a show," Ayla giggled, a lucky bird. She stretched out her arms to the fading suns. "Best morning yet," she said to no one in particular. Bob replied, "Emotionally, your tone has improved 27% from baseline." Ayla grinned. "That's because I have a planet to explore. And a friend who makes me laugh." Peck chirped. The day wasn't over, but it was already unforgettable. The game of sticks. Just as Ayla was preparing to head out for the cave probe launch in Sector 9-2, she spotted Peck near the edge of the clearing. The young terror bird was hunched low, eyes locked on a slender stick. With sudden speed, she pounced, snagging it in her beak and tossing it a few meters. Then, with a silent stalk, she crept forward, tail twitching, and pounced again. Ayla knelt and watched, intrigued. "What are you doing, you silly thing?" she murmured. Peck glanced up briefly, then resumed her game. Ayla crept closer on all fours. Peck backed off warily at first, confused by Ayla's sudden crouch. But after a moment, she resumed her pouncing, casting glances at Ayla with a mix of curiosity and challenge. Giggling, Ayla crawled up, mimicking Peck's stance. She swatted gently at the stick. Peck froze. Then, a blur of feathers. The chase was on. For several minutes, the two darted back and forth through the clearing, diving and rolling, pouncing and squealing in delight. Peck let out excited chirps and trills as Ayla whooped and laughed, her joy echoing across the field. Then Ayla stood, breathless and grinning. She picked up the stick and held it out. "Want to play fetch?" she asked, and tossed the stick a good distance. Peck tilted her head. "Fetch," Ayla encouraged. Peck just stared. Ayla tried again, tossing the stick shorter this time. Peck pounced. Ayla clapped. Good girl, fetch it back. Peck looked down at the stick, then back at Ayla. She tapped it with a claw. No reaction. Another try. This time, Ayla exaggerated her excitement. She clapped when Peck touched the stick, reached down, and brought it back herself, then tossed it again. On the third try, Peck brought it back. Yes, good girl. Peck, that was perfect. The bird chirped, feathers puffed proudly, and just like that, they had a game. Over and over, Ayla tossed the stick and Peck retrieved it. Sometimes she dropped it halfway, sometimes she ran in loops before bringing it back. But each time, her golden eyes sparkled with mischief. It wasn't training, it wasn't survival, it was friendship, and it was fun. The cave echoes. The sun climbed high over Proxima Centauri B as Ayla and Peck made their way toward Sector 9-2. The alien world shimmered with color, vibrant orange grasses waving under a lavender sky, clusters of deep blue flowers that puffed tiny clouds of golden spores when disturbed, and vines that curled and unwound with the morning light like they were breathing. Ayla paused frequently to sketch the flora and the small insect like creatures she saw scuttling beneath glowing mushrooms or fluttering from petal to petal. One sketch of a spiraling vine with translucent leaves filled nearly half a page in her field journal. Peck, ever curious, peered over Ayla's shoulder as she worked, occasionally tapping her beak against the paper. "You like that one?" Ayla asked, smiling. Peck chirped softly in reply. The terrain sloped gently downward as they neared the cave. Ayla could hear the distant bubbling of an underground spring echoing from within. When the cave came into view, her breath caught in her throat. It was far larger than she remembered. The opening yawned in the hillside like the mouth of a beast, 5 meters high, 12 meters wide. The interior was dark, dry, and cool. Despite the sunlight, the darkness beyond the entrance was thick and absolute. Ayla approached cautiously, her scanner held high. Peck stayed at her side, feathers slightly fluffed, her golden eyes alert. "You ready for this?" Ayla whispered. Peck gave a soft, low chirp, not fear, but awareness. She was reading the environment like Ayla was. Ayla set up the mobile probe launcher at the edge of the entrance, adjusting its legs to steady it on the uneven ground. With a few taps on the control pad, she locked in trajectory and power. Pob, ready to launch probe. Confirmed. Stand clear. "You too, Peck. Back up," Ayla said, waving her arm. Peck obediently stepped back, talons clicking on the stone. Ayla pressed the button. With a swift swoosh, the probe shot forward and disappeared into the darkness, trailing a blinking beacon. "Receiving telemetry," Bob reported in her earpiece. "Stable trajectory. Initial scans showing dry interior, moderate humidity further in." Ayla grinned. "This is so cool." Then she heard it. A faint rustle, a flutter, and then it hit. Fwop, 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 fwop. "What the?" Ayla cried. From the darkness exploded a wave of fluttering black shapes. Wings beat around her in a flurry. Ayla screamed, ducking. "Bats! They're bats!" Peck leapt into action. With swift, sweeping motions, she spun, snapped, and kicked at the air, knocking any too close away. Her sharp chirps cut through the chaos. Ayla tripped and hit the ground hard, shielding her head. Bats swarmed over her, shrieking and swirling. Then, as quickly as they'd come, they were gone, vanishing into the morning sky. Ayla sat up, gasping. Peck stood beside her, feathers flared, eyes narrowed, like a sentinel. And then Ayla burst out laughing. "That was awesome!" she shouted between breaths.
Bob's voice crackled over the comm. "I am pleased you are uninjured, but I would not classify that experience as awesome. And while those creatures may have looked like the flying mammals of Earth known as Chiroptera, they were not bats."
"You're just jealous you don't have wings," Ayla said, still giggling. Peck let out a sharp bark of agreement and gave a triumphant hop. Ayla climbed to her feet and did her signature happy dance, spinning and flailing her arms.
Peck mirrored her with a series of bounding hops and wing flaps. The cave no longer looked scary. It looked like a challenge. On the walk back to the shuttle, Ayla was all energy and wonder. She plucked a few of the orange-rooted carrots and celery like stalks from a cluster along the trail. She even spotted a fresh batch of deep purple berries and carefully collected a few into her storage pouch.
Peck stayed closer than usual. Her eyes flicked often to Ayla, alert, watchful. As they crested the final ridge and the silhouette of the shuttle appeared below, Ayla paused to breathe it all in, the color, the warmth, the life of this place. She turned to Peck and scratched under her feathered chin. "Own, you're the best partner in the whole galaxy." Peck blinked slowly and leaned into the touch, and they walked the rest of the way home together, two explorers, a team forged in fire, feathers, and laughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had been unforgettable. Tune in for next week's episode as I, Gwyneth Paltrow, will be reading again. Please add in the comments what adventure you would like to see Ayla have on a future episode. And as always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.